And good morning to you, Samika. The family of Jaquaree Simmons has waited nearly 2 years for an arrest in this case. We now know that prosecutors say what they believe happened to Simmons inside the jail at the hands of a former detention officer named Eric Morales. The incident happened during the winter of 2021, and that winter freeze. Simmons was arrested for being a felon in possession of a weapon. Now, during his stay, Simmons allegedly used clothes to clog the toilet in his cell and then hours later allegedly threw a metal tray at detention officers. Court records show that action led to an altercation with detention officers, including Eric Morales and other staff members. The result of that confrontation sent Simmons to the medical unit, and after he was returned to his cell, he was found unresponsive the next day. Morales now faces charges of second-degree felony manslaughter.
The indictment charges the 6'5", 260-pound defendant detention officer for assaulting the 5'4", 120-pound complainant by kneeing him in the head, striking his head against a door, and then dropping the complainant on his head, resulting in his death.
Now, Morales was not in court when the indictment was read out loud, but we can tell you his bond was set at $100,000. Reporting live, Jeff Ealing, ABC 13, Eyewitness News.
All right. Peace and blessings. Peace and blessings. All praises to the Most High. And there you see the story of Jaquaree Simmons, who was an inmate in the Harris County Jail. That's in Houston. And he was the subject of severe beating by not just that officer mentioned, but a lot of officers throughout the night of February the 17th, 2021. Now I'm going to show you a couple of more videos that detail the situation, but I'm also going to give you firsthand account. After speaking with his mother at length last night, she gave me details on what really happened. But if you recall, a couple of days ago, we just released a video of a young lady, Anasia Smith, who was also severely beaten in that same jail. So this is a continued culture. The jail has actually been called the House of Death because over 30 deaths have taken place in that time since Jaquaree Simmons lost his life. But this video shows you a glimpse of that 250-pound, 6'4" officer who attacked Jaquaree Simmons, who was only 5'4" and 140 pounds. Just watch this video as well.
For the first time in Harris County, a jailer has been charged in the death of an inmate. Eric Morales is the former detention officer now charged with manslaughter. This is 2 years after Jaquaree Simmons died in custody. As Stephanie Whitfield reports, Morales turned himself in yesterday.
This happened during the big winter storm in 2021 that knocked out power across Texas. 11 detention officers were fired and 6 others were suspended. And now 1 is charged with manslaughter. A former Harris County jail detention officer is charged with manslaughter in the death of Jaquaree Simmons. The 23-year-old had been arrested in February of 2021 for being a felon in possession of a weapon. Eric Morales turned himself in yesterday.
Higher bond is necessary due to concerns for community safety and the nature of the offense.
Morales wasn't present when charges against him were read aloud in probable cause court overnight. According to investigators, Simmons had 2 violent run-ins with officers while in custody. First, he reportedly used his clothes to clog his toilet, and later he threw a meal tray at an officer and, quote, charged at him. Both times, the DA's office says there were fights with jailers.
The indictment charges the 6'5", 260-pound defendant detention officer for assaulting the 5'4", 120-pound complainant by kneeing him in the head, striking his head against a door, and then dropping the complainant on his head, resulting in his death.
Simmons reportedly received medical attention and was returned to his cell, but was then left unmonitored because of a power outage during the winter storm. The next day, the DA's office says Simmons was pronounced dead.
When you walk into the jail, we believe you should walk out, and that is important.
The former detention officer's bond was set at $100,000. He's scheduled to appear in court tomorrow morning. Back to you.
And so they give you a little bit about what happened. But according to the mother, there's a string of events that really led up to his beating. Now, he was on probation, according to the mother, and they gave him an ankle monitor. Now, at some point during that probation, they said that he held up pictures holding a gun, which a lot of people do. I'm not saying he did or didn't. However, they came back to his house and arrested him for being a felon in a possession of a gun, right? So, of course, that charge, once again, I think is a little bit aggressive because, you know, he could have been taking a picture, Photoshop with a fake gun, whatever the case may be. But they came and arrested him. So, of course, he's mad. Now, mind you, this is in that big winter storm in Texas in 2021. If you remember that storm, you know, power was out and so forth and so on. So it was during a very tumultuous time. So he gets to the jail. During that time, of course, I think, you know, jailers were forced to work a lot of hours because, of course, people couldn't get to work. People couldn't come in. Power was out. There was a lot of issues during that time. So according to the mother, she said that they were not giving him his medication and they were not feeding him properly. Now, he also had mental health issues. This is another issue that we've seen in a lot of these cases, especially the police unalivements of these men. He had mental health issues, so he was receiving medication. So they were not giving his medication properly. So a lot of times when inmates want to make a statement, they want to make their causes known, what they would do would they would take some clothing and flood the toilets, make the toilet flood. So evidently he took a shirt and flooded the toilet. Now, of course, that makes the COs, the guards, mad. Why? Because in this case, normally the inmates would have to clean it up. But because it was COVID, and of course it was the winter storm, they could not be around. The prison was, the jail was on lockdown. So the guards had to clean it up. So this, of course, made them very, very mad. So then they took it out on him because, you know, they still refused to give him his medication and they refused to feed him. So when they finally brought him a tray, he took the tray out. It was like, I don't want this food. I want my medication. Mind you, he's already going through a mental health crisis. So when he threw the tray out, hit the guard, best believe they came in there with the goon squad, I would say. And, you know, if you ever been in jail, you know, the goon squad is people who come in with shields and things like that. And so the mother said that other relatives of people in the jail had them call their relatives and had them recorded saying what they did to Jaquaree. They said about 11 officers, as they mentioned in the news article, ran into the cell and beat him unmercifully. As the judge or the magistrate read the charges, she said that they kneed him in the head. They smashed his head up against the wall and they dropped him on his head. Now, mind you, this was just one of several beatings, according to the individuals that called his mother. And so they beat him throughout the night. There were several, as the news article reported, there were several beatings and interactions with law enforcement that night that caused his demise. And then, you know, they said that they took down to the infirmary, which is the medical ward of the jail. And according to his mother, when they finally did get the body and have the funeral, they had his hands folded because, according to individuals, they picked him up by his handcuffs and broke his wrist. And so when they took him down to quote unquote get medical attention, then they brought him back to the jail and laid him on the cell. And then that next morning when they came to feed him again, they found him in the cell unresponsive. He was transported to the hospital and then he was pronounced deceased. And, you know, rest in peace to the young brother, and prayers go out to his family. But this is just another jail beating death that we have not heard of. Fortunately, In this circumstance, an officer was charged. Now, mind you, he was only charged in 2023, which is 2 years later. And by accounts of the mother of Jaquaree, he has not went to trial yet. So this is something that we would, be love to see what comes out of this trial. But this has put a new spotlight or a old spotlight on this jail, which has been known as the House of Death. Now, if you don't believe me, just check out this article that highlights the long-standing history and reputation of abuse and deadly abuse by this Harris County jail, basically in Houston, Texas.
The manslaughter indictment returned against a former detention officer has focused renewed attention on rampant violence plaguing the Harris County jail. That's right. Fox 26's Greg Rugen tells us many people believe the loss of life is a direct consequence of too many inmates under lock and key and too few people to guard them.
Fox 26 has learned new and disturbing information detailing horrific conditions inside the Harris County jail on the night of this alleged crime. Critics have coined a new and sinister name for this place of confinement.
The Harris County jail has become the House of Death in Houston, Texas.
And the outcry against what's happened here is growing.
These inmates are not animals. Treat them with the same dignity that you would treat your brothers and your fathers and your sons and your kids. Don't treat them like dogs. They are not dogs.
The latest development, a manslaughter indictment lodged against former detention officer Eric Morales in the death of Jaquaree Simmons. Attorney Dave Batten represented 11 other officers cleared of criminal wrongdoing by the same grand jury.
We've got some scapegoating going on here. I don't know why.
Batten says the death of Jaquaree Simmons occurred during the massive winter storm of 2021, which caused power outages at the jail and forced detention officers on duty to work 30 hours straight.
We don't have enough people working. You can't work people these kinds of hours and expect them to function.
And there's more. Batten believes the public should know Simmons' death occurred as the entire jail was immersed in violent chaos.
There was a riot. In fact, during this period of time, Mr. Simmons had assaulted an officer, was trying to feed him, threw food on him, and came out trying to fight his way out of the cell. The officer hit him, knocked him back into the cell, closed the cell door. He was out of control. It was hard for the officers to try to get him under control, and they did everything they could to get him under control.
Whether the force used to subdue Simmons was criminal or justified will be for a jury to decide. But what few dispute is that fatigue, understaffing, and accumulated stress contributed to the fatal encounter.
We don't have enough people. That's why we had a rape in the jail. It's a powder keg.
If the chronic overcrowding and understaffing continues unabated, Batten believes more preventable loss of life inside the Harris County jail is a near certainty. At the Harris County jail, Greg Rugen, Fox 26 News.
All right. So there you see that lawyer basically trying to white-splain away the attack. Well, the jail was in chaos. He actually threw some food at the guard, and he was out of control. Does that warrant once again him being killed? And he's trying to blame it on staffers working long hours and fatigue and all of those things. Once again, is that a reason for these officers to beat and kill inmates? And as you saw from the brother Quanell X, shout out to Quanell X, this is not the first death in that jail. You saw the woman holding up a picture of her relative. That was not Jaquaree Simmons. And so the fact that these people are trying to explain away, they said 11 other deputies were cleared of any wrongdoing. I don't see how. Once again, that's the legal maneuvering of this judicial system, which allows these things to occur. Now, one thing that I read about this that came as a result of this is they put in sort of a bystander law or something like that. Basically, what it says is those officers who stand by and watch this are just as guilty as those who did. And as he mentioned, 11 officers were reprimanded and 6 were fired. Why were they fired or reprimanded if they didn't have nothing to do with Jaquaree's gift? And just like that lawyer said, yeah, that is a scapegoat. They're scapegoating Eric Morales. Now, why they are scapegoating him, I don't know, but there definitely should be more deputies involved. And hopefully the family will continue to pursue this. Once again, this deputy has not yet went to trial. And so that's another thing, you know, it's different than indicting him than bringing him to justice, as they're already trying to say, well, yeah, he was out of control. You know, once again, the man was 6'5", 240 pounds. Jaquaree is 5'4", 140 pounds, going through a mental health episode. So this is just one situation regarding the house of death. As I mentioned earlier, there was a young lady who was beaten unmercifully in that same Harris County jail last year. And so this is this jail has a long-standing reputation of violence. And not only this jail, but jails all across the country. As I mentioned, we just had a situation or a couple of situations in the Wayne County Jail, which is Goldsboro, North Carolina, which is where I reside, where inmates have come up beating all sorts of complaints and things of that nature. So as the scripture said, remember those who are in prison as if it were you yourselves. And for guards and inmates and prison staff, you know, you just consider yourself blessed that you are not on the receiving end, because it could be you, or it could be your relative receiving this kind of adverse treatment from those who are there to protect them. Once again, the penalty for committing crimes is jail and prison sentences, not mistreatment, not misconduct, not malcontent, not assaults, not batteries, or not even cold-blooded murder by guards who are supposed to be protecting you while you are in custody. And so shout out to the Simmons family and the mother. Y'all see the number. As always, 919-587-7782. Y'all let me know what y'all think about this video in the comments. Rest in peace to Jaquaree Simmons, and justice for his family. And as always, peace and blessings.